Russians are coming. The Russians are coming. So says Adam shit. Hey, it's Peach update time. Oh my God. There's if you're a prosecutor, you're supposed to, of course, put your best prosecutorial case forward. But one of the differences between being a prosecutor in a criminal trial and being a political hack in an impeachment is that in the latter, there is no sanction for lying on a flat-out basis. And it is a fact that the Trump campaign did not collude with the Russians. We know this. Why do we know this? Because Mueller spent a couple of years and a whole shit ton of money trying to prove that it did happen, and he had no evidence for it having occurred. None. That was the conclusion of the Mueller report. That, yes, the Russians bought some ads on Facebook, a few $1,000s worth. By the way, has anybody paid attention to the fact that Michael Bloomberg has spent something like a couple $100 million of his own money so far? Incidentally, I find that most amusing because I've not seen one Bloomberg ad. But that might have something to do with the fact that, number one, I don't watch television. And number two, I don't use Facebook. So I don't see any of his political ads because, so he can spend all the money he wants. Absolutely none of it will ever get into my face because he thinks that, that's the way that he's going to disrupt to the... Oh, my God. But, hey, this is where we are. This is the world we live in today. The rules for impeachments are quite interesting in that the senators are chafing a little bit at the idea that they can't have their iPhones. You can't have your slave labor and your tracked bullshit on the floor of the Senate. Well, you're not supposed to anyway, but, nobody pays much attention to that in the normal world. And so here we are. There's 2 more days of this from the Democrat side, and then the Republicans, Trump's defense, essentially, get their time to make their rebuttal case. So I'm sure that all you're going to hear is pound, 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 pound the table with lies. And frankly, folks, that right there ought to be enough to disqualify this all by itself. Now, I have a ticker in the queue on what has come from several attorney generals in different states, essentially saying that the process that we have going on right now is constitutionally bankrupt and dangerous. Well, I really do want you to read that when it comes out. It should be out in the morning, unless I decide to let it loose sometime later today. But the real question is this. Why is it that all of a sudden, out of, now there's all this concern about overreach and constitutional problems, this, that, the other thing. Meanwhile, you're getting butt-fucked every single day by the medical complex in this country. The effective tax, after all of your other taxes are paid, by a private industry is taking 20% of every after-tax dollar you make. I mean, think about that. This is $1.05 of GDP. And there is an entire industry that never provides, 90% of it, never provides a single second of care to a single person. It is there for the explicit purpose of extracting money from you and robbing you. And all of this is illegal. It's been illegal for more than 100 years. And yet here are these attorneys general. Oh, my God, we have this terrible crisis where the Constitution... Excuse me? You have 100-plus-year-old law that you could use right now. Virtually every state in the nation has an antitrust law that mirrors that is found at the federal level. And several parts of federal antitrust law specifically delegate the ability of states to take enforcement action. Now, they can't take criminal enforcement action, but they can take civil enforcement action. And that means they could fine these people out of existence, essentially confiscate 80% of the money that they're taking and return it back to the people who they robbed it from. Or they could prosecute under state consumer protection laws, most of which do have a criminal element for unlawful deceptive practices. But no, we can't go there. You know what the real problem is? All of these state AGs, along with the rest of the states, are addicted to the federal money. And they won't do it because by God, look at the debate that happened with Medicaid and the Medicaid so-called expansion. The states that didn't expand it, which, by the way, is pretty well correlated with this list of attorney generals, still have it in the first place. Do you know that the states do not actually have to have anything to do with Medicaid at all? That they can opt out of it completely? Of course, none of them will, because then, but you could do that. And additionally, the states could put into place a system very similar to what's in my proposal to fix healthcare with regards to how to fund uncompensated, all right, for those people who truly have no money once you solve the cost problem. And Dennis Neal was banging back and forth again with me this morning about this, we should have 100% backstop for catastrophes. And as I point out to him, if you don't solve the cost problem, it's going to bankrupt the country. And somewhere within the next 4 or 5 years, we're going to have a civil war over this because the government is going to be unable to pay the bill. And when that happens, the shit's going to hit the fan. And I don't care which side of the aisle you're on, that's going to be the way it plays out. We need to stop this bullshit. Anyway, all right, enough of that. Last thing I want to cover today is this coronavirus thing. I know I was screaming a little bit about it yesterday. Folks, you have to believe that the Chinese government is lying. I don't know how badly they're lying, but they've now locked down 3 cities that between them, a couple of them contain more than 1 million people each. Those are big, big towns. And the second one is, I don't know, the third one is 500,000 or 600,000 people. That's a big size city too. Just for comparison, what do you think would happen if you took London, for example, and locked London down? All right, because that's the kind of scale we're talking about here. Or a city like Baltimore. All right. Chicago, for that matter. The greater Chicagoland area is about 7 million, but the city itself is about 2. So, you got to wonder, what if you just turn the metro trains off and the buses and the subway in Chicago? Just shut it off. Nope, no travel in or out. And oh, by the way, we're going to close off those freeways. My God, can you imagine what would happen? So this is way more serious than is being let on. And for China to do this into the maw of the Chinese New Year, which is one of their huge consumer spending binges, is quite concerning because the Communist Party, of course, has a very significant interest in trying to make sure that they put up their fake economic numbers, and they're going to have a hell of a time doing it into the maw of this thing. So I think this is way worse than they're letting on. They're lying. I don't know exactly how badly they're lying, but I'm very sure that they're lying. All right, and I think you have to take that as the base expectation, is that whatever they tell you about this and the supposed impact, take it, multiply it by about 5, and you're probably somewhere close. What I am especially concerned about is the death situation with regards to this. I will not be satisfied until I know whether or not the deaths that are coming from this are the common ways that people get killed by the flu, which is a secondary bacterial pneumonia normally. So you start with the flu and then you develop a secondary infection in your lungs, and that's what gets you. And that normally gets mostly the elderly and the very young. What is much more concerning is if there are direct deaths being caused by this flu, hemorrhagic events and things like that. And at that point, you start wondering whether or not there's a cytokine storm problem being triggered by it directly. That sort of thing is very, very difficult in a viral context, can be nearly impossible to treat because there's really not a whole lot you can do about it. And essentially your body attacks itself. And so if that kind of thing starts, Just for context on this, folks, remember the Spanish flu in the early 1900s, right into the maw of World War One, killed about 3 or 4% of the population, and the death rate from the flu itself was somewhere between 10 and 20% of those people who got infected. Roughly a third of the population of the planet got that flu. All right, so this is, I mean, when you think about that, that's an extraordinary number. Now, people try to say, well, but the sanitation situation was terrible then and things like that. This is all true. However, remember that the common thing was that you had hospitals that were basically open wards, okay, for situations like this. Today, we have hospitals that have, little rooms, right? The old open ward thing is gone, long gone. Well, I don't know about you, but have you ever, counted up all the beds that are available in those nice little, single and double rooms in a hospital? How many do you have versus how many people potentially could get impacted by this thing in a given metropolitan area? Look, if we have a situation like this that truly develops, your best option is going to be to self-quarantine in your own house and not leave for a month and a half or 2 months until it kind of burns itself out in a given area. And then, then you still might get it, but that's probably the best defensive measure you're going to be able to take. So you need to start thinking about, could you do that? Could you do a shelter-in-place kind of thing for that kind of purpose? And I think if you actually look at this, most people are woefully unprepared to be able to do something like that. I mean, just think about the situation. Do you have enough food in your house to be able to to make a go of something like that? Would you go crazy if you could? I mean, my God, talk about the ultimate Netflix and chill thing, right? Maybe Netflix stock will go up on that. Who knows? Anyway, something to think about. And I think you should pay very close attention to this, because this is the kind of risk that could come up at any time, folks. And even leaving aside the potential of of there being an intentional vector, some kind of bioweapon, this sort of situation has a way of arising. What normally comes with these kinds of strains is that they jump from the animal population into the human population, and they do that via mutation, because normally there's no cross-species transmission. And then, due to viral resortment, you end up with something much nastier than what you originally had. And if that allows for direct transmission between people, then you've got big trouble. And this is why these kinds of things tend to originate in places like China and India. And it just has to do with the density of people and in animal populations in close contact. We tend not to have that around the United States. I mean, sure, you have farmers that are, but it's relatively dispersed. We don't have the kind of situation that you have over there. And yet, that's just kind of how that works. So this is just something to pay attention to, folks. Keep your nose down on this. It's not freak out time, but again, the Chinese never tell the truth. One final note. China apparently has arrested a Chinese citizen who was studying here in the United States. He went home. I don't know if it was on vacation or whatever. They busted him for things he posted on Twitter that were considered unflattering to Chairman Xi. So you might want to think about exactly why it is that we should have free trade with a country that does stuff like that. Yeah. I mean, they want to have a gulag, that's fine, but shouldn't we be thinking a little bit more strategically about, we claim that we have these much vaunted human rights, but you can fly a baby Trump balloon in a parade. You try to do that in China, you're going to prison. And somebody who is over here, that was a Chinese citizen, and says something, they find out that it happened, and they always do because they're always looking at everybody. You go back, you come through customs, bang, on go the handcuffs. We have free trade with this country. Why? Yeah, I know. Because you have to have that your iPhone has to be $50 cheaper, and Apple has to have a stock price that's $100 higher. Right? That's the answer. Okay. I'm your ticker guy. Have a good day.